All right, I think we're ready to get underway. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm Jeffrey Pickett. I'm the Community Outreach Strategist for the district, and I want to thank you for coming to this reopening session. We just wanted to let you know right off the bat that we are recording this session, and we will be sharing it with you after the fact. So in case there's anything you miss or you know anybody who would have liked to have attended but couldn't, you will be able to view it. We're also live streaming this on Facebook, so I'd like to welcome all of our viewers who are joining us through Facebook as well as Zoom. And we are going to be presenting, this is the same presentation from yesterday. So if you were with us yesterday, and already received this information, we don't want you to think that there's going to be brand new information. Of course, the questions might be different, but we don't want you to think that you need to stay around for both necessarily. So that being said, I'd like to turn things over to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Joel Boyd, who will give a formal introduction, and then we can go from there. So Dr. Boyd.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm seeing a note from someone that says that we're unable to be heard. Is that, is there a way we can check that?
I can. I'm going to go check the Facebook feed. Give me a second. Yep, our audio's good.
All right. Can we start the slide deck and the presentation as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you to all who shared with me your audio. I want to first start by saying our thoughts continue to be with those of you who have been impacted directly or indirectly by the traumatic impact of the COVID-19 disease. Those of you who are family members who have been impacted, or you perhaps personally. And we also know that the effects on all of us on our ways of life, while we expected that the COVID-19 pandemic to have passed by this point, it has not. So we are here now to share with you the best information we have available right now, but this is an evolving circumstance, as you've come to understand since the time when we closed schools in March. This is going to be a very different reopening, no matter what reopening looks like here in Lowell. So while the health data currently suggests that in-person learning is possible, we're going to share with you what that looks like. The health data can change at any time. The current threshold for infection rate to consider whether we look at in-person learning at all is 5%. Lowell is currently below 2%. But again, that's a moving target, and right now we're in August and we're making decisions for September 17th. So it's important to keep in mind that while our goal here is to share with you the best information we have to clarify for you what to look forward to for school for next year, it also very much is an ongoing and evolving process. So thank you for joining us here today. We're going to continue to hold these sessions, and we are committed to continuing to inform you of our decision-making process and to make sure that we can include you in that process. I've been in this business for a long time, and I can tell you undoubtedly, this is the most difficult decision-making process that I've had to engage in as a school leader. And I know how difficult it is for you as a family. I understand the anxiety, I understand the stress, and we're gonna be with you throughout this process to support you as families as you consider the options in front of you for school reopening. Jeffrey, can we start the slide deck?
Absolutely.
So today, what we're hoping to do is to give you information about the two options for school reopening, including remote learning and in-person learning. Again, understanding that in-person learning is dependent on the COVID-19 data at the time. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that we can ensure the safety and health of everybody within our community. So we'll also be informing you of the safety and health criteria and measures being used to determine the in-person learning option. And then we'll be providing you with details about the process for selecting the learning option that best meets your family's needs. So our reopening plan prioritizes the safety of our students and staff, and it's designed to maximize options for families. We understand that this virus has affected and impacted families in different ways, and that family choice needs to be critical within this process of in-person or remote learning for next year. So our guiding principles for starting next school year, our decisions will be guided by the latest health data and input from public health experts. We will be monitoring the rate of positive cases here in Lowell and statewide. We're going to be working to maximize options for families and offering a remote learning option as well as an in-person option. Again, as long as the health data continue to support physically being in our buildings. We make a commitment to equity with the belief that a public education is a fundamental civil right. Families and students who have historically been underserved have had a voice in the planning process and will have their needs met. So as I mentioned earlier, the positivity rate of COVID-19 must remain below a 5% threshold. That's from Johns Hopkins University. That's the threshold rate that they have publicized. And our current rate in Lowell is 1.13. We have to consider the condition of each of our buildings, air quality, windows, classroom size. We have to continue to consider our ability to follow and maintain health and safety guidelines, social distancing, disinfecting, and sanitizing requirements. Now, we've also considered within this process our family survey, as well as guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and also largely guidance from our reopening task force, which included principals, teachers, and parents, starting back in June and working up to developing out guidance for us to consider within this reopening plan. So what should you look at when you're considering options for 2020, 2021? What are your child's individual learning needs? Can those needs be met either in person or can they be met remotely? Will your child have adult supervision during the day to support the learning process, or will your child be in need of childcare? Will you need bus transportation to school in order to attend in person? Now, bus capacity will be limited and students will not be guaranteed transportation next year. Again, this, as you may have come to realize, bus transportation is an extraordinary challenge within the social distancing requirements and in order to mitigate risk of spread of the virus in getting kids to and from school. So families may need to be responsible for transporting their own children to school each day. And also, you should consider whether there are any health concerns for your child or members of your immediate household. Again, our goal, our top priority is to maintain the safety and the health of our entire community. So we have two full-time models available. And now by full-time, we mean 5 days a week, either remote or in person. And again, the in-person is going to be limited. So we'll get into and sharing with you how we'll be able to make sure, or how we can support you through making those choices. But one-to-one devices, that's Chromebooks, laptops, they're going to be available for every student across both environments. In-person is going to look very different as well, as there's a requirement for students to wear face masks, stay in the same cohort, make sure social distancing, and there's also going to be limited transportation. Students will also eat their meals in classrooms. So while we'll work to approximate the experience that students had in prior years, it is going to be necessarily different due to the virus that surrounds us. Full remote version will also look significantly different from what you experienced during the emergency closure. So again, every student will receive a device. There will be clear attendance and participation requirements. Students will be graded on a typical scale, and it will be a mix of live as well as live virtual lessons, as well as independent learning across subject areas. There's also we're going to be working to make sure that we can address hotspots and Wi-Fi concerns, and we're also going to be working to make sure that all students can also participate in sports and extracurriculars, again, if the virus itself enables us to host those extracurricular activities at school sites. And then grab-and-go meals will be available for all families as they were last spring through the summer. And so Dr. Guillory, our Chief Schools Officer, will share with you some examples of what you might be looking at as you consider in-person or remote learning in terms of scheduling. Dr. Guillory?
Thank you, Dr. Boyd, and good afternoon to all of our viewing audience. So as Dr. Boyd set the stage for this conversation. This is an example. Again, and I want to stress an example of what schedules could look like for an elementary student, and we're singling out first grade here, but you could look at this across the elementary continuum as an example of what a possible schedule would look like. The biggest shift here is for us to really distinguish what transpired during our emergency closure back in March, where we didn't have a structured time requirement for our remote learning as specified by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, whereas now we have some newer guidance that was issued 3 weeks ago that speaks to those time requirements. So as our task force groups were working, or actually had submitted this information, new information from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has come out to speak more about time requirements. So on the left side of your screen, you are seeing an example of what a schedule could look like for any one of our elementary schools, where the day begins with a morning meeting or a check-in, and it progresses through all of the structured academic time, as well as their specials, lunch and recess. So that's what would constitute a typical elementary schedule. But when you look on the right side of your screen, again, you see those same educational requirements that are listed there that also speak to the time requirements. And time, I mean by number of minutes that are required for our students in this structured learning time. There are many details that we're still working through. Many of you, or many parents, are asking about whether or not this has to be real time, in person, asynchronous, or synchronous. Those types of questions and details, as soon as we land on and continue having the conversations with our collective bargaining units, unions, will then make sure that we communicate those pieces of information out to you. But the large part here is for our families to note that there are recommended time blocks for our students to engage in those curricular activities, whether that's with the teacher at the same time, or whether the teacher starts them and they continue to work in isolation, and then have a check-in point with their teacher. But as Dr. Boyd mentioned, attendance is going to be required, as well as grades and grading. Our normal grading processes will take place here as well. Next slide, please. And then here we have an example of a middle school, or what could be a middle school schedule. And again, we're singling out 5th grade here, but this could apply across our middle school sector. Again, an example, not what will actually be happening. But again, on the left side, you have what a day would be like at any one of our middle schools, depending on what their start time is. This is what the schedule could look like. And here we want to single out what we're calling a mask break. We know that this is a new shift or requirement for students. And what we want to do is afford them in a space that's safe, where they are out further apart from one another, that they would then be able to take their mask off for a brief amount of time and then return back to their classroom settings. They will have, again, their English language arts, their math, their science, their social studies, as well as their allied arts, or some folks call them specials. All of those are accounted for in the in-person middle school example. And then again, on the remote learning example, that side of the right side of the screen, again, speaks to designated times that students could be engaging with their content matter, as well as having a check-in opportunity with their teachers. So again, all of these are opportunities really to just say we are dedicating a structured amount of time for our students to engage with this learning. Next slide. And then here again is an example of what could be an experience for our high school students. Again, on the left side of the screen, you have what it looks like for returning to the building itself. And on the right side of the screen, you have what the experience could be for the remote learning schedule. And again, in each of these cases, for the in-person students, mass breaks, those types of things will be in person, will be important, but then also for our students in the remote experiences, screen time breaks will also be important. So all of those aspects and attributes that those recommendations that came from our task force will be included in what our final schedules or final recommended schedules would be for our students and families. And I believe Chief Desmond is up.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory. The next slide discusses what a learning management system is. A learning management system is built to provide schools and districts with a student management system that would allow us to be able to, in one location, provide information around course content, the ability for teachers to teach the children via a virtual platform, customize reports. It would be a place where students could upload their assignments and teachers could correct them and provide them with feedback. And it would also provide teachers with the ability to see how long students are logged into course modules, how they are progressing through the module, how they're doing with daily and weekly assessments. So teachers could then provide tier 2 instruction to support learning needs. All of the courses that are provided within the learning management system are also aligned to the Massachusetts state frameworks. The learning management system allows teachers to customize the coursework. So there are things that are already provided that could be not used, and teachers could create their own lessons and upload them within the scope and sequence of the material. Also, the learning management systems would provide professional development to both students and staff, consisting of webinars, consultation sessions, and support materials and resources. This system would also provide parents with technical support as well. The learning management system allows for a client-hosted model, so courses taught by Lowell Public School teachers could be modeled after the in-person flipped instructional model that we would be using for in-person instruction. We could go to the next slide, please. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but courses may be customized to meet the needs of our district in the learning management system. So teachers can, again, add content to the existing course, or they could choose not to use some of the existing content in the course system. Courses can also be, modules within the course can be shifted and aligned to our district curriculum maps. Again, teachers would be grading the students' assignments and providing feedback. So all of the grades would be determined by the teacher of the course. And then again, the technical support piece, the LMS offers technical support to assist students with things like login, if they're struggling with the functionality of the platform, and there would be someone available to answer technical questions relating to the course and submitting assignments and so forth. That technical support would also be available for staff with questions around how to navigate the system. And I think this is Latifa Phillips.
Me, Latifa Phillips, Chief Equity Officer. So there have been many questions about how to select your school placement. So if a family would like to request an in-person placement, you'll need to submit an opt-in through an application. The application will be available starting August 19th. We'll email it to you as well as post it on the LPS website. So please make sure that you have your email in our database. And if you don't have it, if you're not receiving our emails, I'll ask Jeffrey to put a link to the online form that you can send your email, update your information with us. So the application period will be August 19th through the 27th. That's when the application will be available. You can submit your application at any time during that window. It doesn't matter if you submit on the first day or the last day, because we will be running a lottery if more families opt in for in-person learning than there are available seats. So if we can go to the next page, we can talk more about the lottery. And well, actually, before we get to the lottery, it will be based on the capacity within a school building. So I'll ask my colleague to share more information about the different capacities for our school buildings.
Thank you, Latifah. This is Dr. Hall, Chief Operating Officer. As you can see, we're doing an analysis of all the campus seats that we can safely offer, and we expect this number to go up or down depending upon the conditions. As you can see on page 1, we're assessing the number of hand sanitizer stations we can acquire, the number of foggers per building, the amount of ventilation through windows we can ensure. So as we address more and more positions, there's the possibility that seats can go up, but of course, there's things on the next page which would show they could go down. For example, staffing considerations could negatively impact the number of seats, and of course, the percent positivity, if it went up, that also could limit the number of seats that we could have in a school, because there'd be social distancing and other safety considerations. As you can see, about halfway through the page, we plan on updating this number every week. And I know, for example, the state, I think, released new numbers for Lowell around 4 p.m., which we'll check after this call. And hopefully next week we'll put a goal, what we hope to achieve by the opening of school for potential seats. As you can see too, we're going through the schools and determining what classrooms can and can't be used. As you can see for the Robinson this week, given the number of seats we're ultimately going to have, we determined that there's no need to use interior classrooms. So you can see them recommending 117, 18, and 19 be taken offline. And additionally, the day school, for example, the classrooms are so small there, we're recommending that those be relocated to another location, which the superintendent's team is going to study and make recommendations over the next week or so to the committee on.
Thank you, Jim. So that brings us back to the lottery system. So if the demand for in-person seats exceeds the availability, the capacity, we will run a lottery. It will be determined by a weighting system. And here are the different weights that we'll take into account. Students with individualized education plans, as well as students identified for a learning-related accommodation within a 504 plan. Students identified for McKinney-Vento services. Those are our students who are experiencing homelessness, our students who are English learners, and as well as entry grade levels of our different buildings, so elementary, middle, high, the lower grades. And then families who have more than one child enrolled in the public schools, and then students of our personnel. Now, that doesn't mean that if you don't fit one of these categories that you can't apply for the lottery. You can, but we would prioritize these applications first based on a weighting system, and then everyone would get would be placed on a wait list. Now, specifically for kindergarten, we know that many families registered during the May-June period. They were entered into the kindergarten lottery, and we haven't notified families yet, but we will. And families who secured a seat through the lottery will still be eligible to attend the school that they received through the lottery or through this application process for next school year. So we will let you know where your assignment is for next school year, But in addition, for this upcoming school year, all kindergarten students will be assigned to their neighborhood school, and that's a school that's within walkable distance. This assignment will be for only 1 year, and there may be some exceptions for students who have older siblings in another school. But given that transportation will be limited, we did want to make sure that our kindergartners had the opportunity to have an opportunity to opt for an in-person where there is capacity, where seats are available. So another question we often get is whether you're stuck for the entire year with the choice that you've made. So once the application deadline, once the application period closes, we'll run the lottery, and everyone will be assigned an initial placement. We do ask that once you are in that placement, we ask that you commit to that placement for at least a grading period. And then after that, we'll reassess capacity and see if there are additional seats or whether families want to switch to a different learning option. And then we'll run another lottery, and we can make changes at that point. So again, this is just for the 2020-21 school year, and next year we will revert back to the placement of the school that you attended last year. You would continue in that school in person, hopefully, and also if you requested a transfer to be able to go to a school closer to you, that would also be a 1-year placement. So transportation is similar to the requesting in-person seat process. So there are limited transportation seats. So once we understand what the transportation capacity numbers are, we will run a lottery for transportation for those students who will be attending in person. And we will weight the lottery similarly to the in-person process, and we'll assign seats according to the outcome of the lottery. So with our community outreach, our goal is to ensure that everyone has the information that they need to make their decision. So we have 2 outreach periods. One is August 7th through the 27th, and that's informing families of the in-person and remote learning options and the process for making the selection. And then we'll have a second outreach process September 4th through September 17th, and that's preparing families and students for beginning the school year within the assignment that their child has received. So some of the outreach activities and strategies. So we have our general online sessions such as this, where we start to give you that initial information. We'll have targeted online sessions targeted to special programs, special populations, different languages. We'll have targeted in-person sessions, small group if requested. And next page. We'll continue to communicate via social media, Connect Ed calls, the website. We will be making informational videos and one-pagers to help families understand their different options. And then we'll also be making one-to-one phone calls to make sure that families have access to the information, that they're able to ask any questions to help them make their decision. So again, we ask everyone to be informed and stay engaged. We know that new information is coming every day, every week. We'll keep you updated via email and the website. But also read a safe school reopening plan and then decide what would work best for your child, and then declare what your preference is. But ultimately, placements will be made based on capacity of within the school buildings for anyone who requests in-person learning. And then once all of the assignments have been made, we'll make sure that you have the information you need to start the new year. So again, key dates, August 19th is when the opt-in form becomes available. The application period closes on the 27th. We'll start informing families by September 4th of their placement, and then we will prepare for a successful school reopening on the 17th.
All right, thank you, Latifa. Again, thank you everyone for joining us for this conversation. I'm going to pass it over to Jeffrey, who's going to lead us through a little bit of the Q&A. Jeffrey, if you could, because sometimes we can't get to all of the questions, so maybe up front share a little bit about the FAQ document that's going to be built, and then we'll go through as many questions as we can with the amount of time we have.
Sure. We have been collecting questions via our email address, which I'll actually enter in right now if you'd like to send some more questions if they don't get answered or addressed during this particular forum. It's community@lowell.k12.ma.us, and you can email us there. And we've been receiving questions there. We've also been taking all the questions that we have been receiving in the chat, in the Q&A sections of the Zoom and also Facebook platforms, and copying those as well. And we will be compiling a list of frequently asked questions, an FAQ document that we'll be able to share out with our families relatively soon. Probably at the beginning of next week, I would say we'll have that ready to share out to families, and that should help you further make your decision. I've been tracking some of our Facebook questions during this presentation, and we're getting a lot of questions about Chromebooks, and two main questions. One simply is when they will receive the Chromebooks. So if we could walk through what a timeline might be in order to distribute the devices. Just to clarify, because we've also gotten some questions about this, every student in the district can get a Chromebook. It's one-to-one devices. So if anybody could chime in about when the students will receive them.
Yes, Ms. Desmond is our Chief Academic Officer. She can share with you a little bit of information about the Chromebooks.
So our intent is to have one-to-one devices. We currently are awaiting a large order of Chromebooks, and we have a plan in place for when we receive them. And the distribution will be based on the schools that students are currently enrolled in. So as we receive them, the building leaders at each individual school will be supporting the distribution. But at this point, we're still waiting for a large number of the Chromebooks to be delivered. As people probably can imagine, there's a huge demand across the country for Chromebooks for education at this point. So again, as we get closer to the start of the school year, which is going to be currently September 17th for our students, there will be more information distributed to families so that they understand clearly what that distribution process will be. But it will be at the school sites that their students are currently enrolled in. And that's regardless of whether there's a change to remote. Wherever they're currently a student, that's where the distribution site will be.
And oh, sorry, Latifa.
No, Robin, I wanted to ask if a family has their own computer, do they have to take the school-issued computer?
They do not have to, but we want to make sure whatever device they have in their home, I'm assuming this is for remote, Latifa?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever they have in their home, we need to make sure that it meets the requirements for remote instruction. So that would be really important.
Another question about devices that we're receiving is to differentiate how they'll be used in the in-person model. It's clear to see how we would be using devices remotely, but in person, a couple parents were commenting on Facebook about concerns about having the students on the screen the whole day in school as well. So.
Well, the task force work for in-person instruction was to focus on lessons that would allow the student to utilize a Chromebook to eliminate the amount of materials that are being passed amongst students. So for safety reasons, we want to make sure that students are doing most of their work in class on their device so that they're not handling lots of materials that other students have handled, if that makes sense.
Sure. There's another question before we move on from Chromebooks. A parent's asking on Facebook if there will be IT support. And I know that we've offered IT support throughout the closure and during the summer with the tech tents. So I was wondering, Robin, if you could fill us in about tentative plans for tech support.
Sure. We're definitely going to continue with the tech support. The tech tents have worked well. We want to make sure that there's technical support throughout the district. And so we will continue with a robust plan for tech assistance to be available throughout the city. And so it might not be a tent. It may be some utilization of the school as well. But just because of the COVID guidelines, we chose to use a tech tent so it was outdoors and we could socially distant. And we will continue that model into the fall.
Latifa, this question I think would be best answered by you. We got a question on Facebook about will siblings with students who have IEP, so a child who has a brother or sister on an IEP, will they be given priority as well so that a family could keep all of their kids in person, for example, even if that particular student didn't have an IEP?
Is this for in-person?
Yes.
So there is sibling preference for in-person. I am hearing the question a little differently. Will siblings who don't have an IEP, will they get priority as well? Is that the question?
Right. Like, let's say you have a family of 3 children and one of the children is on an IEP, but the other 2 are not. I think this parent was asking if their other children would also be given priority in the process.
So we do have different priorities within those categories. That's something I can definitely follow up with the family if they send me their information in the chat. Happy to give them a more concrete response.
So this was, if you're still watching, this was a Facebook question. If you could email us community@lowell.k12.ma.us, and if you could email us that question, we'll be sure to give you a more concrete answer. So we're getting a question about masks. Are masks required during class instruction, even if desks are 6 feet apart?
Yes, masks are going to be required for anybody on campus, every age group, every child and adult as well. Everybody will remain 6 feet apart at all times. So both measures are going to be taken at all times to make sure we can mitigate risk. Again, we're following the strictest safety guidelines from the most reputable sources at all times to mitigate risk of the virus spread.
Somebody's wondering about what recess will look like.
Sure. Ms. Desmond?
Sure. So there will be outdoor time built into the schedules, and we will ensure that students remain socially distant. This is something that we were successful in doing in our in-person summer school. And so we just develop activities that students can do outside, but while remaining distance with 6 feet apart.
We're getting questions about, will applications be sent to homes? So just another clarification that the application is for online and will be emailed to you, correct, Latifa?
Yes, that'll be emailed. We'll let you know, we'll notify you via ConnectEd. If you have challenges with submitting an online application, you should contact our Family Resource Center because we do make accommodations for families who may need additional support with the online system.
And that is, I think I've typed this number in enough communications. I know this by heart. That's 978-674-4321 if you're looking to contact the Family Resource Center.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I think I see some questions here around the remote learning, Robin, around who will teach it, what will that look like? Will there be live pre-recorded sessions or I know you talked a little bit about that, but
Yeah, so all of that's true. There will be some live instruction using a communication platform similar to Zoom. There will be some videotaped lessons that are uploaded so that students can watch those lessons. And then they'll be taught by Lowell Public School teachers. So all of our teachers that are interested in teaching online will be people that will be doing the instruction. It won't be somebody from somewhere else. It will be Lowell Public School teachers.
How will instruction differ for elementary age versus 5 to 12 in terms of remote instruction?
So it won't differ significantly, Jeffrey. It will. So basically, we adhere to the Mass State Framework curriculum, and so we have a curriculum map that's aligned to the frameworks, and that's what we teach at each grade level. Is what we are required to adhere to the state standards, and so the instruction will be the same. It will be a combination of videos. And also videos and live instruction using a platform.
Has the district chosen an LMS yet, which is a learning management system?
No, we have not selected the LMS. I did see a question in the Q&A about how we went about determining the LMS companies. The RFP was a state RFP that went out through the Department of Education, elementary and secondary education, and those were endorsed. And so districts are selecting from those endorsed companies based on that RFP. But we have not made a selection yet.
Let's see. Other questions? So is there a limit to how many children per household could apply for in-school? The in-school option.
Latifa?
can you say that again?
Is there a limit to how many children per household can apply to attend in-school?
No, every child can make that decision, to apply and enter the lottery. And of course, assignment will be based on capacity, building capacity.
Looking for other questions. We did get some questions about mask breaks. If we could go through that again and just what that would look like during the day. Is that something that all grades, even high school, would be dealing with, or is that really just going to be built into the elementary and middle schedules?
No, that's an experience that all of our students will have. So we singled it out as an example, again, in the middle school schedule. Certainly, we have some structured time there for students to go either in an open air space or a large enough room where they could spread out even further than 6 feet, and maybe take a few moments to remove their mask or drop their mask, that type of thing. But certainly for our high school students, that's a need again, an option that will be afforded them. Certainly not something that's required. Students aren't required to go to this area and remove their mask, but it does provide an opportunity for those that may be experiencing fatigue with it to get a little bit of a relief, and then go back into their structured learning environment.
This is another application question. So if the lottery for an in-school setting, they were asking if the lottery for the in-school setting is school by school. For example, this parent's child is currently at the Riley. If the Riley is full, but a spot is open in another elementary school, is there a chance that this student could be placed there for just this school year?
So if this is a matter of transportation and not being able to get to the assigned school, we will take that into consideration. We're not looking into regular transfers of school buildings for purposes other than distance or if there's a sibling.
We get this question a lot. What happens if someone in the school, whether it's a student or a staff member, tests positive for the virus?
Yeah, so if anybody tests positive, if they're exposed, there's a pretty clear-cut and set requirement from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that every school in the Commonwealth will be following. So there's a series of protocols and a set requirement, everything from notification to quarantining to testing, that could eventually determine whether a classroom, a program, or a school needed to shut down. So there's a series of protocols. We'll follow those all from the state's guidance, as will every school in the Commonwealth next year.
If a student is having difficulty wearing a mask, is there another method that they can use to protect themselves and others, such as a face shield? What's our guidance there for students who may have like sensory issues, for example?
Yeah, our current plan is face covering for every student. Students that have exceptions within their IEPs or others, we can work on a one-to-one basis, but a face covering is definitely required. Whether that be a mask or a shield, definitely a face covering that needs to be worn at all times by everyone who's on campus.
We've talked about the cohort idea a lot in our reopening plan and how students, we're going to try to keep them within their group. So for example, not having lunch in the cafeteria or not having an activity with another class, at the elementary level, for example, just to limit that potential cross-contamination. We're getting a question here from a high school perspective about how we can stick to the cohort model in high school where there's, more flexibility with the scheduling.
Yeah, say that. So the cohort model at the elementary school versus the high school.
Right.
Yeah, there's so the high school is the most complex scheduling. What we're going to be working through is to make sure that we have minimal exchanges in hallways of students, working to make sure that we can minimize the number of students that are in common areas, but it will work significantly different than how a cohort works at a middle school where it's a team of students. So at the high school, there may be cohorts that look like a middle school, but not all students have the same course schedule at the high school. Anybody on campus can't stay in the same classroom like at the elementary school. We'll be keeping them in the cohort model at the middle school, and then the high school will be working to minimize the amount of time in public spaces that end up with large numbers of students coming in contact with one another. But we'll make sure that we, again, adhere to all of the social distancing requirements. I think sometimes those questions come up maybe based on the news features of what's happening in other high schools around the country with large congregations of students in hallways and cafeterias. We're going to make sure that we don't have that happen through the scheduling process that we undertake for any students who are on campus. The other answer to that is we are currently planning for only right now a limited capacity at the high school for that very question. Overall student enrollment is necessary for us to moderate because we run such a large high school. So we've got to make sure that, and we're currently analyzing that, assessing that, and that goes back to the presentation about building capacity to make sure that we can keep those exchanges and those exposures low.
A parent was asking about emotional support. So I hope I'm not taking this out of context, but I'll take that to mean social emotional learning. So if we could discuss those efforts in starting the school year, especially with our SEL curriculum.
Sure. Ms. Desmond?
So the SEL curriculum will be embedded into all modalities, if that makes sense.
And we're getting a question going back to masks. If the parent or family, for that matter, are they supplying the masks, or the Lowell Public Schools supplying the masks?
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. So it's a mask for every student. If a family chooses to supply the mask, so long as it is a standard face covering as you use in public now, that's allowable. If the child doesn't have a mask, we'll certainly provide one.
The school hours are different right now for virtually all of our elementary, middle schools have, somewhat different starting and ending times. Is that going to remain the case this coming year?
Yes, we expect it to, because in addition to the limited on-campus capacity, we also have limited capacity on our school buses. So we need to make sure that we stagger our routes as well to maximize the number of students who might have access, even though there are limited seats, even with the staggered schedules.
Somebody's wondering if you have to fill out an application for every single student, or is it going to be a per family application?
So this is a student by student decision. So we will ask that each child submit an application, but we're going to make it as simple as possible, for families. So if you want to submit multiple, it'll just be a couple of questions.
We got a couple of comments on Facebook. People were wondering if they were going to have to do like their birth certificate and a copy of a utility bill again. This is not registration for kindergarten or entering our schools. This is merely you're opting in for one option over the other, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So we have a couple minutes left to see if there's any last questions that we can get to.
While you look for that last question, Jeffrey, with just a few minutes left, can we also make sure we give people the information about the upcoming sessions as we did in the prior?
Yes.
All right, and then let's make sure, so we can do one more question. Let's give them that information. And I want to thank everybody again for your time. I know how tough this time is, and we're going to continue to try to provide you with as much information as possible, knowing that this is an evolving health circumstance.
So let me pull up, share my screen here and take you to our website, and hope everybody can see this. We have another general info session Tuesday, August 18th at 6:30. We also have a Spanish language session tomorrow night. That's Thursday, August 13th at 5. There'll also be other language-based sessions that will be added to this list. This is on our website on the homepage of our website, the Lowell Public Schools, lowell.k12.ma.us/reopening info sessions. There's also a session for special education families where we can delve into some of those topics in more detail. That's Friday, August 14th at 11 a.m. And we have a couple of sessions for incoming kindergarten families because, as you heard earlier in this presentation, kindergarten has a unique set of circumstances. So we wanted to make sure that all of our incoming kindergarten families were well aware of those. So that's Thursday, August 13th at 9 a.m. and Tuesday, August 18th at 4 p.m. And again, the Zoom information is on our website, lowell.k12.ma.us.
And there will also be a session for families with students in the Latin Lyceum and high school students that will be scheduled.
Yes, we just haven't solidified those dates and times yet, but as soon as we do, we will add it to that list and also let you know on social media and via our Connect system, which reaches out to all of our families. So looking to see if we have any.
We have another high frequency question from multiple people that would be helpful for our last question, Jeffrey?
Let's see. I think we've answered this, but just to reiterate, because this parent said that she's asked 3 times, so I just want to make sure we can provide an answer. Is it true that all students that go in person will be doing all work online and there will not be any paperwork being done? So I know we talked about this earlier, Robin, but if we could just reiterate the why we're kind of going more digital in person.
Sure. So in person, of course, the teacher would be there with the students instructing, but we're moving to the one-on-one device distribution so that in person students can do their work on their computer to prevent the passing out or transferring of materials. So in a standard classroom before COVID, children would share materials, supplies, papers would be passed out to do work on, and we want to move to a digital platform to prevent that exposure. We don't want students passing around the same materials. We want to eliminate that transmission. So we are planning to have all students working on their devices. That's not to say teachers aren't instructing, but instead of passing out materials and exposing children to materials that have been handled by multiple students, we want to have students working on their devices.
All right, with that, I want to again apologize that we couldn't get to every question, but we will be formulating an FAQ, make sure we can get FAQ document uploaded. Jeffrey took you through the website, and we have other sessions coming up. Each of these general sessions, however, are the same, so apologize in advance as Jeffrey did. They're not evolving sessions unless you join one of the specialized sessions, and the specialized sessions will be able to look in depth at each of those topics. So thank you again. We'll continue to provide you information as we get further health data, and we'll get further specificity on our school opening plans as we get closer to the first day of school. So thank you, everybody. I look forward to seeing you when we open schools, even if at a distance. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Boyd. Thank you to the cabinet members, and thank you to all of our attendees.